Hey guys, and welcome to the Lunge podcast. Today, Ash and myself welcome on our resident nutritionist, Liam from PH Nutrition. We're going to take a very deep dive on the principles of eating to build strength and pack on muscle, as well as some of the overlooked principles in the muscle gain and strength building process. We're going to discuss macros, micros, meal timing, and recommended supplementation for strength gain and muscle building. And of course, some practical tips for making eating for gains as easy as possible. So as part of this episode, I wanted to give the Lunge and Lift listeners early access to the Strength Formula, which is launching mid-April exclusively to Lunge and Lift listeners first. The Strength Formula is your answer to the strength and muscle building equation. We will have you lifting the most weight you ever have while packing on lean muscle tissue and giving you optional extras to either add some pump work for some of the extra gains or some cardio to keep those gains lean. Now, my goal with this program is to give you all the answers, so when it comes to testing strength, you're fully prepared. And unlike most group programming, I want to impart my 10 plus years of in-person and group coaching experience beyond just the programming, provide you with educational content throughout your journey so you understand how you got so strong and massive so fast. So to register interest and get some exclusive Lunge and Lift listener bonuses, please click the first link in the description box below. And as always, thank you to our show sponsor, thetrainingstimulus.com. If you're a PT, coach, or manual therapist, please check out the website to get your free 3 Vital Principles of Movement Mechanics ebook. Also, wit-fitness.com, you can head over to their website for all your WIT kit and use discount code LL15 and get yourself 15% off your purchase. And lastly, Hydro for your blood flow restriction apparel, use code LL20 for 20% off. Right, let's get cracking.
All right, Liam, welcome back to the show, mate. How are you doing today?
I'm very well, lads. Very well. Thank you for having me back. I'm going to be pushing double figures for appearances very soon on your podcast. But no, thank you so much, and congrats on the 3-year, anniversary. It was fantastic to see so many episodes. So yeah, happy days.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, you're probably responsible for a few months of those. So thank you for all your help with getting us there. So today we're talking about getting big and strong. I think it's something that we talk about a lot, and we talk about the training side of things for hypertrophy and for strength. But one of the most underestimated parts of getting big and strong is the nutrition. And something I often say to my clients looking to get bigger, especially, is that the eating is much harder than the training. Like, most people are very good at pushing themselves in the gym if they're motivated, but they're not so good at pushing themselves in the kitchen and at the dining table. So we wanted to get you as our expert on to talk through the science of getting bigger and getting stronger, the similarities, the differences, and some practical takeaways for how to actually do it. So please, can we open up with what are the fundamental principles of getting bigger and stronger? Is it as simple as a calorie surplus, or what? Take us through the nuance, please.
Right, yeah, let's get into it. So you alluded to it there, that training is more important than nutrition for muscle gain. Like, when it comes to losing fat, like, nutrition is more important. Like, you can do any type of training and lose fat as long as you're in a calorie deficit. But I always say this in my presentations, that no one got jacked walking on a treadmill, and you got to have the correct stimulus, because if I put the most perfect muscle gaining diet in, if your stimulus isn't correct, you're not going to gain muscle. So first point of call, training, 100%. Then there are some key principles, like some big kind of pillars that we need to be focusing on. Now, the first one is calories. Now, we'll probably get into a little bit more detail that you can build muscle and get stronger in a calorie deficit. However, it's very, very challenging and probably only applicable to people that are very, very new to training. So for most people, this, especially maybe most listeners, this doesn't apply. So you would need to be at maintenance or in a surplus. And again, details will come on that. Then it becomes protein. Like, protein is king. You need to provide your body with the raw materials to grow. And there are some minimum requirements. Okay, so you want to be hitting at least 1.6 grams per kilo. Like, that's a minimum. And again, more detail will come throughout the podcast. Then you got carbohydrates, and we'll be talking about the importance of those. They are, extremely important for providing the energy for you to be able to train, to create the stimulus for muscle growth and strength. And they also help with recovery. They help with sparing protein, so it does its job of muscle building. So you need carbohydrates, and we need a certain amount of fats. So we need this balance, but that's the hierarchy of importance: calories, protein, carbs, then fats. Okay, if you get it wrong and focus on, and put in more importance or having higher amounts of the fats and, low carb and lower protein, then you are gonna have your progress, slow down. So the hierarchy, that's the key thing, and that's where you need to always kind of keep reverting back to.
Love that. Now, I was actually going to ask, but you highlighted there that that's the hierarchy, and I've always kind of had this idea that fats are really important, especially when you're in a more of a muscle gaining approach. One, mainly for calories, so maybe for the hard gainers, but also for like the hormonal benefits. Now, is that then, have I just plucked out my ass and just made that up, or is the fat, are fats like how much you get, like you do want to be on a little bit of a higher end to support or hormonal functions?
You're absolutely right. We do need fats for hormone production, like hormones, especially steroid hormones such as testosterone, estrogen. These are produced from cholesterol, and we need good fats for lots of other functions in the body. Okay, so we do need a minimum amount. Some of the research has shown that zero point 0.5 grams per kilo, so that's relatively low, can still be absolutely fine to provide enough fat for you to maintain, anabolism and grow muscle. For me, I like to pitch it at 1 gram per kilo. You won't be going too far wrong if you pitch it around that at the starting point. And you don't really, in my experience and from the literature, you don't want to deviate too much. It's protein and carbs that you want to probably manipulate a little bit more. But from a hormonal point of view, yes, you do need it, fats, and maybe at certain times you want to go slightly higher fat, when we're getting into maybe the, more kind of when you're really getting into progressive overload and you're, feeling a little bit up maybe towards the end of a kind of training cycle, when fatigue is accumulated, and you're just kind of getting to that last bit where you do need to be eating a little bit more calories, then that's when you might want to push your fats up to 1.5 grams. But most of the time, you want to be sticking around that 1.2 grams.
Okay, cool. Maybe it'd be worth going systematically through those 4 pillars. So if we start with calories, what sort of surplus should we be aiming for? Because I think the classic end of the spectrum are just eat as much as you can, get really fat whilst you put on the muscle, or people are too shy to be in a surplus at all because they're scared of getting fat and they end up not putting on any size. So what's the thought process behind picking your surplus?
It really depends on a few factors in terms of your timeline, your time frame of how quick. Maybe you've got to get to a certain weight, or you want to hit a certain weight for whatever reason within a time frame. So 12 weeks, I want to put on 2 kilos. Like, the faster that you want to gain muscle, the higher the surplus needs to be, in simple terms. Okay, there's a really cool study that I love. It's called I've named it the tortoise and the hare. Okay, basically they took these were really, bodybuilding. They were trained guys, and they took them and split them into 2 groups. Okay, the tortoise ate a modest calorie surplus of around 250 calories, and the hare group, they gave over 500 calories, 550 calories, I think. And this was over a 4-week period. Now, the aggressive bulking, so we're looking at a more of an aggressive kind of surplus. They put on like I think it was 5.3 pounds of muscle. Okay, in 4 weeks. So what's that? 2.2?
That's like a lot of muscle.
2.5 kilos. Yeah,
Fuck.
but they also put on 4 pounds of fat.
Yeah.
Maybe the calorie surplus was a bit bigger, actually. A thing here. When they do it like 67.5, kilos. I can never figure that out. Just tell me what the surplus
Yeah.
was. Probably should have done that.
Yeah.
But it was a big surplus. But they put on 5.3 pounds of muscle and they put on 4 pounds of fat. Okay. But the tortoise group, they gained 2.6 pounds of muscle, so, just over a kilo, and only put on 0.7 pounds of fat. So if your goal is to build muscle, an aggressive surplus, it absolutely blows muscle building out of the water. Like, if you can be a higher calorie intake, we're up over 500 calories, 600 calories, and we'll talk about some overfeeding studies where we went up to 800 to 1,000 calories a day over feeding, over maintenance. Then you will gain muscle if your training stimulus is correct. Okay, so this is from a calorie point of view. Then if you're wanting to maintain a little bit of leanness, your body composition, then you need to play the long game a little bit more and understand that muscle gain is going to be slower, but you're also not going to gain as much fat. Like that in simple terms, and the literature reflects this, that's going to be the case. Now, there's a ton of nuance around this. Like these guys were trained. If you're very new to training, okay, so maybe you've done a little bit of team sports, and then you've gained a little bit of weight, and now you want to do some more kind of like you really want to get in shape and you want to do strength training. Then your training age is relatively low, and maybe your body fat's high, muscle mass is low. If you start training, then and you eat at maintenance, you're going to be able to gain muscle and lose fat at the same time. The starting point is so crucial, and this is where there's so much nuance around it. As your training age increases, then the ability to recomposition, where you lose fat and gain muscle, it diminishes, and that's where then you probably need to look at adjusting your surplus based on your goal and based on your timeline. So if you've got a timeline of 6 months, for me, I would say play the long game.
Yeah.
I think gaining muscle slower but minimizing fat gain is more of a sensible strategy than bulking and cutting, because bulking and cutting is challenging. You also then impair training performance when you have to cut, because you have to restrict your calories. Whereas if you eat slightly above maintenance for an extended period of time, you still are providing the raw materials to grow. You're still providing energy to train, and you're minimizing fat gain. So then you'd only have to do a small cut to lean out or to get to an ideal body composition, as opposed to this undulating approach over a 6-month period, 3-month period, which for me is challenging on the body. You're placing stress on the body. You're having to change lots of variables. You're having to change your diet. You're trying to change your habits, and for me, I think that's a less sustainable way to approach it. But obviously it comes down to context, in that, what's your time frame, what's your starting point, where you're going to go. But I hope that kind of gives people an understanding of probably the best way to do it. If you haven't got a deadline, for me, you want to create a surplus of up to 250 calories a day, and that can just kind of be within that ballpark figure. And again, the literature suggests that you aren't going to put on a ton of body fat, and you are still going to provide the body with enough energy and raw materials to grow.
So, talking from experience with this, is when I had probably my biggest bulking phase, essentially, was right before I competed in my natural bodybuilding show. And the main things, I didn't calorie track, but I definitely ate enough. But the one thing I did make sure I hit was my protein, because I was able to always keep that at the top of my mind. I made sure I was aiming for around 250 grams of protein at the time. So it was quite high, because I was thinking, right, I need a lot of protein because I'm in a bulking phase. And I aimed for just as many calories as I can eat. And I can eat a lot of calories, so I wasn't worried about undershooting. However, the dieting phase then took me 6 months to then get down, because I needed to do it slow enough where I weren't just going to deteriorate and lose a load of muscle. So I've obviously just built all this muscle tissue. And you kind of alluded to it there, where you said how you can do any style of training when cutting to lose body fat. However, if you're trying to build muscle, you'll probably be doing a very similar style of training to when you was building muscle to losing body fat. However, you won't be able to necessarily push as hard when you're in that deficit. So your loading on the body will start to drop down, because not only will you probably then start lifting less, but you'll probably have to go to failure less because the recovery rate is going to be slower. So there's a lot of, say, side effects essentially from them being in that deficit, even if you're training in the same way. So from past experiences, I've found that being in a little bit more of a surplus has been a much easier way to keep training intensity high. And if you are trying to build strength and you are trying to build muscle, that is just from experience, because then you go into all your sessions just feeling more pumped and ready to train, compared to thinking, oh, I just got to get through today's session, even though you probably will be feeling that at times because you're feeling tired and beaten up. But you have the energy. It's more the mental fatigue that you're probably trying to battle against.
Yeah. I completely agree. You flipped it for me there. You flipped it. So you've done a very short, what I would approach is that for me, most diets should have a long-term focus on strength and performance with very short periods focused on body composition. Okay. And this is even if you're trying to lose fat, you should focus your like most of the year to be eating at maintenance, and then have very short periods where you cut. Okay, maybe that's pre-holiday, post-holiday, January, I don't know, before December. And what you can then do is maintain a better weight and then always try to look to increase your performance. It's the same with muscle. You should always look to be, long-term approach should be at maintenance or into a very small surplus, which again is going to allow you to keep seeing progress within training, within recovery, with, hormone profile, muscle soreness being relatively low, as opposed to going for a very short bulk where you just go mental, put on a load of muscle and a load of fat. And yes, you increase your performance, but then you've got to spend long periods cutting.
Yeah. Sorry.
And what that does is it's challenging for a health point of view as well as performance point of view. So if you zoomed out across the year, instead of spending what you did half the year trying to cut, if you spent, 10 months of the year trying to just be at maintenance or above, then you can only spend very short periods of time, and you don't need to spend, you don't need to spend that much time trying to diet, and you can be relatively aggressive in 1 week, 2 weeks, 10 days to help regulate body weight. For me, that's how most people should approach it.
Sorry, I realized I didn't actually finish my train of thought when I said it, because it's where I was going with that was I put on the most amount of muscle and strength and size and just in general over a big period. But then when I then had to do a 6-month diet, that was then where it wasn't necessarily conducive. And where I was trying to go for that is because I don't like dieting. So spending a long time dieting is more stressful on me. So where I've gone wrong over the years, that's where I was trying to lead to, was I wish I'd known that and been in more of a smaller surplus, so I haven't had to keep dieting down. And that's kind of, I didn't finish my train of thought, so apologies. I didn't mean to flip your side.
Wow, we were saying the same thing, so it's all good.
Yeah.
I think there's a couple of things that jump out at me from that discussion, and one of them is most people want to be close to being at an ideal body composition most of the time. So the only reason you should go for a big surplus is if you're in a real rush to put on the mass. But then 100%. The question that I'd like to ask you, Liam, is it, say you want to put on 4 kilos of lean muscle, I know it's a bit of a piece of string answer question, but what's the time difference if you were to do a super aggressive bulk and then maybe have a maintenance period before your cut to try and lock in the muscle gain, versus doing a slow and steady? Obviously, there's a massive dependency in how big the big bulk is and how small the small surplus is. But in terms of, if you are somebody who wants to put on 4 kilos lean as quickly as possible, doing the aggressive bulk and aggressive or longer cut versus the slow and steady, how long is it going to take to get to that end destination? What are the considerations when you're thinking about something like that?
Yeah, it is a little bit of it depends, because there's numerous factors. However, what you want to do then is have this kind of plot, okay, and this is where, if you want to do this, you do need to be pretty detailed with tracking. okay, tracking your food, tracking your weight, okay, and tracking your progress. What you want to do is, those that are listening without video, you can't really see what I'm doing, but I'm creating a band. Okay, so you would be like, right, 4 kilos. My starting weight is say 70 kilos, and I want to get to 74 kilos. And my time frame, this is where you got to be realistic. There's loads of weight gain kind of tables that will give you training age and rate of muscle gain per year. And as you get more, your training age goes up, unfortunately your rate of muscle gain gets lower. But this is, again, it can also come down to starting weight. If you haven't kind of been, so for me, I haven't reached my muscle kind of like genetic potential in terms of muscle building, because I've just been doing too many metcons my whole life. So I haven't actually done enough training. So if I committed to it, I could, even though my training age is high, I could still get bigger, if that makes sense. Anyway, I digress. There's a band. So set a target. So say you want to be like, right, I've looked at it and I can gain 0.5 kilos of muscle a month. Okay. So I extrapolate that out and say, okay, so it's going to take me 6 months. I can be a bit more aggressive. Maybe I take it to 4 months. What you can then do is you plot 10% above and 10% below. Okay. Your target weight to that over a month period. Okay. So each month you would plot, and then you just draw 2 lines, which become 10% either side of the calories that you created, that you calculated to get there.
Love this.
So if I'm 70 kilos, I'm like, right, okay, I want to be 4 kilos heavier in that. If I bring my timeline shorter, I need to be more aggressive with my calories. The longer than my time frame is, the less aggressive. So I'm going to plot it. My maintenance is, I'm making numbers up, 2,000 calories. So I'm going to plot a surplus of 2,250 calories. Okay. So I now draw a band up to my goal. I then track my weight, and every week on average, okay, this is the key thing. You have to track every single day, and then on average plot where I'm going. If I'm dropping below my weight, so my weight then is dropping below my predicted band, so from 70 kilos to 74 kilos, then I need to increase my calories by 10%. So if I on my month 1, I'm below my projected thing of 71 kilos or 70.5 kilos, I need to increase my calories, because I'm not hitting the trajectory to get to 74 kilos. That's the key thing. It's the trajectory that you'll need to be following. So then I would adjust. And you can break this down into months, into weeks. It depends on how much detail you want to get to. So for me, I can be like, okay, I need to increase. Or if my line is now, my trend is going over, so now I've gone to 72 kilos in 3 weeks, I'm like, I'm probably eating too much. So then you can bring that back down. And this is how you're going to gain the right type of weight. It is a little bit more detailed, and I realize this is a podcast and probably a horrendous description because you can't see it without a visual. But it's about plotting your starting weight, current weight, plotting your end weight, getting into a surplus depending on the time frame that you're doing, and using weight as your measurement to see if you're on the right track. If you're gaining too quickly, we know that that's going to be predominantly body fat. Okay. If you're on the right timeline, it's going to be muscle. So it's all about plotting that trajectory. But use that thing of around kind of like, that kind of 10% calorie. If you're going above, to cut by, 10%. If you're going below, increase by 10%. Follow it, track every week, and you won't be going too far wrong.
I love that. And even without the visuals, I think just if you're picturing the graph, and when you always see like results of like a scatter graph, right? And you see all those X's and you're looking for the mean, like you're looking for that middle range, and you want to make sure all your X's are in that middle range. I love that as an idea. And I just haven't.
It's got to be a band. It's got to be a band. That's the thing. That people get too linear with it in terms of like exacts, but it's got to be a band, and it's what you do on average. And if you're moving in the correct way and the trend, then you'll be on the right way.
Yeah, because I think when we are on a trend, sometimes it is just then trusting that journey, that say, okay, this is going to work. We just have to stick with this and keep going with it, and we will get there. Just trust that process. But something which I just thought of is, people might be thinking, why would I want to do a really, like, put on as much weight as possible in a short period of time? And I then thought of a practical example with myself. I competed in a powerlifting competition where I was in the bracket but at the lower end, and I couldn't diet down, so I had to eat up to get to the top end of my bracket. So I had to eat up to 110 kilos. So then when I got to the competition, I was sitting at 109. And I was heavy. I felt strong. I felt good. My calories were high. My protein was high. So that was, and I had a time frame of, it would say, around 8 to 10 weeks. So once I decided that I was going to be in the weight category that I was in, I knew I had to eat up into it, because I didn't want to be on the lower end, because I was going to be competing against heavier individuals. So if you are competing, especially in a strength sport, and you're within a bracket, and you don't mind putting on a little bit of extra fluff, then adding those, going for maybe a little bit more of an aggressive one, so you can build muscle, you can provide the building blocks for strength, and you can give yourself the energy to absolutely smash your sessions. That can be a real good takeaway.
Yeah.
A good question for you. Sorry, Ash. Why putting on extra weight, even if it's fat, how does that equate to being stronger?
My joints felt better. I felt, so like for me, when I was lifting heavier, everything just felt more comfortable. So apart from my health, I didn't feel fit, I didn't feel good, but my strength felt awesome. So like for me, it's like I can't tell you the science behind this, but it's in just like, I know when I'm heavier, I feel a lot more comfortable squatting. I feel a lot more comfortable benching. Deadlifting doesn't really matter so much, but when it comes to squatting and benching, I really feel the extra load in my body through that weight. And it's, I don't know if it's placebo or what, but I know I definitely feel stronger when I'm heavier. But with the deadlift, as I said,
Mass moves mass, right?
Yeah. So, but again, it's, I think that's such a common thing to say, but do we understand fully why does mass move mass? But you look at the strongest people, they're not exactly small. Don't get me wrong. We have some outliers. We do have the 60. I know there's someone called like Taylor Atwood, who's, I'm pretty sure he's like 75 kilos or something like that. Competes at like high level American USAPL, I think it is. And like the amount of weight this guy is shifting is insane. And it's like, you're talking like 400 kilos, like say like deadlift number rate, like heavy. And he's only 75 kilos. So yeah, okay, mass moves mass, but then that's a massive outlier there. So yeah.
But I think all else being equal, you have more mass, you have more inertia. Like it's easier to stabilize. Like if you're 100 kilos versus 110 kilos and you're squatting 250 kilos, having that extra 10 kilos on your body, it actually means the bar is a smaller percentage of your body mass. So it's affecting you less. It's moving you less than if you were you had the same muscle and strength capacity in a lighter body. And we are going to come on to the differences between size or strength later. But just while we're on the calories, why is it then, Liam, that builders do the bulk and cut thing rather than this slow, steady one? Surely it must be fastest to do an aggressive bulk and cut to put. So say, let's stick with that 4 kilo muscle gain, lean muscle gain example. So let's say it takes 8 months to do it the slow and steady way. Could you get to 74 kilos at the same body fat faster by doing an aggressive bulk and cut? And is it just harder? Is that why we don't recommend it?
Yeah. Well, it depends. It can be easier because you've got to be consistent for less amount of time. So if consistency is your issue of following a diet and going all in for potentially 3 months, and doing a 2-month bulk or whatever, and being super aggressive and then being relatively aggressive with your cut would get you to a body weight. But then you're looking at solely body weight and composition as your goal. Like Rob said there, health is disregarded, performance would probably be disregarded, in that you're focusing on a number. And if that's the goal, or if you focus on an aesthetic, and if that's a goal, that's totally cool. You could probably do that. However, if you're pretty good at just kind of, being relatively consistent with your diet, then you can play the slow and steady one. Yeah. That's an easier way then if you find it easier. Like some people find it hard to eat a lot of, and if you potentially can't train enough, again, that's a big variable. If you can't actually create the stimulus for that growth, overeating is just going to make you put on more fat. Whereas if you can train 6 times a week at a high intensity, high volume, maybe double days, do everything outside of that, then bulking and cutting in a short period of time is going to be more beneficial. So yeah, you can do it, buddy, quicker. It's just
great. Nice
probably a
distinction.
lifestyle thing more than anything.
Yeah, I do feel the bodybuilding from what I say I've stayed in touch slightly with it, but just because I am still interested by that world. And I think the idea of going for full blown bulk into a massive cut has kind of gone by the wayside a little bit. I think they've started to understand that they're even like, especially we're talking a lot more like the natural bodybuilder side of stuff, because then they haven't necessarily got all the extra supplementation to provide themselves with the deficiencies that they might be getting when they're in a deficit. There's natural bodybuilders generally stay leaner, so they're more on the steady maintenance, like getting slowly bigger compared to the assisted. But even then with the assisted lot, I remember, this is probably going about 5-6 years ago, it's about the Phil Heath era, like around that. Then when people were getting into their off seasons, it wasn't just smash back burgers, pizzas, and just put on like all their previous weight and then train. It was actually, let's reverse diet. Let's start to build in and actually stay a little bit more show ready, because they were doing a lot more guest appearances and stuff like that. So I think the old school way of doing things of massive bulk and then this like 6-month cut has kind of just dissipated slightly. I think mainly for the health side of stuff as well. Yeah. So, yeah. Well, let's move on to protein, because that was obviously the second pillar. And I kind of put to you just then when I said about how I approached it when I was in my like big off season, and I was just trying to have quite high protein. And I had the idea of I need to hit way more than normal because I'm trying to build muscle. Since then, I've learn a little bit more about it, but I'd like you to maybe break down, was I doing the right thing there, or was I just wasting a load of money on some extra protein?
When you say high protein, what was you hitting?
Well, I was going close to 300 on times when I was tracking. So at the time I would have been about 100 kilos. So it's on the higher ends. Yes, it's around the 3 grams mark. Yeah. And I know since then there's been a lot of studies that kind of give us a bit of a ballpark, but I'd like can you break this down a bit more?
Absolutely. So protein is so key because the body is in a constant state of breakdown and gaining when we talk about protein. So you have muscle protein breakdown, and we have muscle protein we have breakdown and we have accretion. So we want to be in a positive protein balance across the day. That's why protein is so key. Okay, you got to be thinking about building a house. That analogy, you don't provide the raw materials, you're not going to be able to grow, even if you've got all the builders sitting there. So the builders of the training, they're all there ready to go. You don't give them any raw materials, they're just going to be kicking around, and the house isn't going to get built. You've got to be in a positive protein balance, and this is the thing we are constantly breaking down and regenerating muscle tissue. So we need a constant supply of protein. If we're looking at and the research shows that there are minimum amounts. Like there's some studies there where even if they overfed people up to 1,000 calories, if their protein was low, around 1 gram per kilo of body weight, that's low. They gained the tiniest amount of lean body weight. I think it's about 0.25 kilograms over an 8-week period. But if you hit around 2.4 grams, which they class as a moderate intake, then they gained 2.2 kilos of muscle, lean muscle. There's a bit of a minimum threshold in the research. So you're looking around 1.6 grams per kilo. Okay. If you hit that, then and distribute it across the day. Okay, so don't just eat 200 grams in your evening meal. You find that you're okay in terms of muscle building, okay, like in terms of actually providing enough raw materials for your body to grow lean muscle. Okay, then there's a bit of a sliding scale. Okay, it does seem to, I mean, the research is kind of conflicting. There's a little bit of a bell curve from like 1.6 as you go up to around 2.4. Then there are potentially some more benefits of going to a slightly higher protein intake. Okay, this ends up being a little bit more as you go through your training age. As your training age becomes a little bit more larger. So earlier, people that are just getting into resistance training or getting back to it after a long break, then you can kind of get away with a slightly lower protein intake. But when you start to become more trained or the gains become smaller, then higher protein intakes seem to be more beneficial in terms of helping you to build muscle. So that's where you want to maybe pushing up to 2.2, 2.4 grams. Now, if you go above that, those that are in the literature will know of Jose Antonio, and he's done a lot of protein overfeeding studies where he's gone up to 3.6, sometimes even 4.4 grams per kilo per body weight a day, and it's really challenging. There is some research to suggest that actually that helps with building muscle and losing fat. It's actually losing fat is probably the one that it helps with more when you get up to those higher levels. But for me, it's just very, very, very impractical to eat that much protein consistently. There were loads of dropouts in the study, the studies that he's done. So practically, we're looking for a take home. If you're listening to this podcast, you want to be aiming from anywhere from 1.6 to 2.4. The more trained you are, slightly higher protein intake that you should have, and potentially for me, the leaner that you are, the higher protein intake you want to be consuming.
Does this differ if we're focusing on building strength? Because obviously building muscle, we want that kind of like steady supply of protein throughout the day to aid in protein synthesis and just, as you said, to try and stay in that protein rich state. Whereas if we're trying to build strength, the goal isn't necessarily to build muscle. So would we need to change our approach? Do we need less protein or do we need more protein? Like what would you recommend there?
You don't need more protein.
Okay.
Definitely not. Like you wouldn't. This is something that we're going to come on to now, the carbohydrates, which is one of my favorite topics to talk about in muscle building, because carbohydrates do so much. So for me, when you're trying to get stronger, it's like it doesn't, like you say, you kind of spoke about that guy, the 75 kilo guy. Like he doesn't need to put on more weight. He's very, very strong. What he needs to do is provide energy for that training session. Protein's a terrible source of energy. So if you're increasing your calories by protein and you're already matching the minimum amount, then you're not going to be providing a adequate energy source to help with training, which is the key thing for driving strength. So you need to put more weight on the bar. You need to hit higher percentages. You need to be able to do more reps, more intensity, more volume, and carbohydrates are going to help you to do that as opposed to more protein. So for me, getting stronger, you need more carbs.
And just quickly,
once protein is matched.
So just lastly then on the protein part before we move on to carbohydrates, would timing of protein matter as much with strength training compared to muscle building?
There isn't. No, it wouldn't change, if I'm honest. As long as you are supporting your training window, that can be pre and post training, pre or post training, with some form of protein. And as long as your distribution across the day is relatively even, it doesn't have to be perfectly even, but as long as you have that kind of consistent protein intake, then you're going to be maximizing protein synthesis. You're going to be reducing muscle protein breakdown, and you're going to be in an anabolic state, providing the body with a constant supply of amino acids to repair. Now, from a strength perspective, that doesn't change. You still, muscle hypertrophy and muscle, size is still going to be a contributor to getting stronger. So you still want to do that. It just means that you don't need to potentially kind of add any more and take up the calories that you would be consuming from carbohydrates when you're trying to get stronger. You need those. So the differences don't necessarily change too much between those two. You still need to be doing the basics. You need to be doing the fundamentals. Otherwise, you are going to be having gaps in your progress.
Awesome.
Before we do get onto carbs, I've got a couple more questions on protein. I think a few listeners will probably be asking, what does consistent mean? How many meals a day, ideally evenly spaced? Are we thinking 3, 4, 5? What gives us the best coverage to stay anabolic for most of the day?
There again is a lot of factors. It can be dependent on the type of protein, depending on what you're eating it with. So for me, aiming for 4 feeds across the day allows you to evenly spread your protein intake as a pretty much of a bare minimum. So we're looking at breakfast, lunch, snack, or shake, dinner. Even if you eat 3 meals and have a shake kind of thing, it's that even distribution across the day is a pretty good starting point. I know fasting is a different thing that we need to cover in a different episode, but then this is a key practical tip that I would say to a lot of people. If you're then trying to increase your calories to either increase strength or get bigger in terms of muscle hypertrophy, often we just think about eating more, eating bigger meals. The first step you need to do is to increase meal frequency. Okay, it is so much easier to do that than to eat more or a bigger meal. Okay, because we get full quickly, and protein is a very satiating nutrient. It fills us up quickly. Okay, so eating more and just making your main meals bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, for me, is not an optimal strategy to increasing your calorie intake and to help support getting stronger, building muscle. So if you're eating 4 times a day, go to 5, add a snack, add a shake, then go to 6. Okay, for me, there's a bit of a ceiling from 6 meals. Okay, I think most of the time, if you're thinking, right, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, 2 snacks and a shake, or a pre-bed snack, like that's pretty much most people can do that without going, oh my God, I'm just constantly eating. Okay, that's then going to give you enough distribution across the day, enough time for your body to digest that in between meals, and we're going to be then allowing that protein distribution across the day. So that's what I'm talking about. That there, like, it doesn't have to be 7 meals a day. It can be that, but the key thing, if you are struggling, if you are finding I'm struggling to eat enough, I can't seem to get stronger, then hopefully train in the correct way. But if you start to increase meal frequency, it's been the biggest change in a lot of people that we work with in terms of them going, oh my God, yeah, I actually feel like I can get to the higher calorie amounts, and actually I don't feel like I'm just stuffed the whole time, because you can include very energy dense foods in between your main meals. Protein,
you don't get that slump as well.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you're constantly feeding the body, so you're constantly providing more materials for you to build, and that's the key thing. The body needs that. Whereas if you just like dump a load in the evening and be like, "Hey lads, go and build the house. Oh, I'll be back in 18 hours." They'd be like, "Huh?
Yeah.
What? How am I meant to be able to do this? We can finish all this in 2 hours. Like, what are we going to do? Is sit around for 16 hours, and then what happens is that the things start to break down and they crumble. So again, this is where I'm going a little bit off topic, but I don't really believe hard gainers exist.
Yeah,
I think it's more challenging for some people, but I just think people are missing the fundamentals, not doing anything, all of these things that we're talking about today, more consistently enough. So that's where I would talk about protein distribution across the day.
Can I piggyback on that as well? As in, like, from previous experience, even with like clients and so forth, I've definitely erred on the closer to 5 meals, mainly because I feel with 4 meals, especially people that struggle to eat, getting enough protein in 4 meals is quite a big amount. So like say for someone like myself, if I'm trying to hit say 200 grams of protein a day, that's 50 grams of protein per meal. Most people could do that at say dinner and maybe at lunch, but at breakfast will be like, they're like, sorry, how many eggs, how much sausage, or how much bacon, how much this? And it's like, steak, what? Like, so if we can then kind of think an area closer towards maybe 5 meals, because that frequency. So, and if you do struggle with say feeling full too quickly, going then to 6 meals, it sounds extreme, but it's just like, that's why bodybuilders do it a lot of time, because they're trying to hit the protein that they're trying to hit. And at the end of the day, if you are trying to build muscle, you look to the people that do this as their sole focus. That is what bodybuilding is, right? So it's like they a lot of the time like to aim for around 6 meals a day, because they can then spread their protein throughout the day, so they can have more carbohydrates, so they can have decent levels of fat. And it's just like, I just don't think people are willing to also change their habits at breakfast time to get more protein, because their first thing is, okay, I'll have my normal breakfast and a shake. It's like, could you not have some normal food? Could you not have some real food at breakfast rather than just relying upon a shake? I know that is an option, but the benefits of, you know, whole nutrient dense food is so much better than a protein shake.
Yeah. You just hinted at my next question, which you alluded to earlier, Liam, was it depends slightly on the type of protein. So how does that impact the anabolic nature of a meal, and also the the spacing that you require for meal frequencies? Do you mean that if you eat a certain type of protein, it actually will stay in your system for longer compared to other types of protein, so you can actually get away with a lower meal frequency potentially?
Yeah, definitely. So if you're looking at whole foods, like you say, if we take a whey protein isolate shake compared to, 10% fat mince, like that 10% fat mince is going to be digested a lot slower than the whey protein isolate. So then you can get away with extending the next feed if you're eating more whole foods, with potentially that are going to be coupled with fat, coupled with fiber. Then the digestion of those amino acids, again, is going to be slower. So if you're eating a big serving, then, say like 40, 50 grams, again, you don't need to rush the feeding after. And that's how it's essential. If you are going to have a lower frequency, like Rob said, the amounts need to be higher, and you probably need to edge towards more protein that is away from liquid based, away from very low kind of like or pair it with things that are going to help to distribute that protein absorption. So this is why casein protein is having, it's slow digesting. This is why people have it before bed, because it's slow digesting, and this is why bodybuilders or people that are jacked and big and strong, they have regular meals. That's why they use meal prep companies where it's got 40, 45 grams of protein, and they have 3 of them a day. Do you know what I mean? It's not, you got to look at, like you say, you got to look at people that have been successful. That's a reason for that. You don't see bodybuilders just chugging shakes with their cereal in the morning and that's it. Like, they eat big meals and then they utilize faster digesting protein at certain times of the day. So yes, there is a slight difference. Most people don't need to worry about that. Like, that's my opinion. Like, don't get caught in the weeds going, oh, Liam, should I eat whey isolate? And if I time it with my oats, is going to slow the digestion of my blueberries. I don't know what I'm going to do.
My blueberries.
Eat big consistently for longer than Monday to Thursday. So this is that is, but it's nice to know about. But again, we don't need to concern ourselves too much about it unless you're well down the line. Rich
Piana used to say, RIP, real fucking food, RFF. Whenever somebody asked him a question about nutrition, just RFF. Like, for most things, just eat real food, and that's the better option. And final one before we move on from protein. In the studies where there's the extreme overfeeding of protein, what sort of protein were they giving the participants? And the reason I ask is, if somebody is struggling to add more protein, does that give us any insight as to the easiest ways to add protein if you struggle? For example, if you don't want to eat tons of steak or it's expensive, like, what are the other considerations for how you can add in what might feel initially like excessive protein.
Yeah, there was a mixture. There's a mixture between the studies that I've got here, which will be linked. We've sent them all across. A mixture between meal replacement shakes, so like the mass gainers.
Okay.
So this was a blend of whey protein concentrate, whey protein isolate, and kind of like oat fiber, and different carbohydrates in there. And then one of them was with like fast food. So they had 2 fast food meals, like burgers. To jack the calories up, because I kind of understand that people might go, oh really? And I'm like, well, if you've got to eat 1,200 calories more, it's quite challenging to do that from fiber rich energy, like nutrient dense foods. So they did that to put their protein up. That was a 2.4 gram compared to the 1 gram. So it depends, like the studies are mixed between just eating a little bit more of their normal diet. So they were educated in terms of increasing the portion sizes. Some have added mass gainers in, so their dietary habits stay the same, and they've just added a mass gainer shake in. And others, again, dietary habits stay the same, more consistent for that person to be following their diet, and then adding in, like I say, 2 like more energy dense options in between that. So for me, again, you got to get that fundamentals, real fucking food first. And then I do think that when people struggle to get higher calorie amounts, utilizing liquid nutrition and utilizing the, like products such as mass gainers and such as what we call super shakes. Sometimes I get people to blend up like 700 calories worth and just sip it through the afternoon in between their meals. Do you know what I mean? I'm like, well, there's 700 calories there. People use whole milk. Like, use whole milk, use a banana, use some, some protein. And, you don't have to put that much protein powder in it. You can even use yogurt, use some fruit, use some nuts or seeds or nut butter, and all of a sudden, like, you'll be surprised at how quickly you can get to a high calorie amount. And you sip that as like, an extra over your day, and there's how you can get higher calorie amount without then impacting your normal meals. This is the way that you got to kind of think about approaching it.
So
Brilliant.
Moving into the world of carbohydrates, I want to finish off with this little bit of protein as well. So just because we're thinking, mainly because, again, this is the second pillar, right? So I really want to make sure we nail this. And because we keep mentioning how people struggle to eat. And so as I was thinking about this, I was thinking, okay, maybe we talk about the sources of protein, which we just did there, like fast acting, like shakes where you got like the isolates and so forth, or then you got something like a steak, which will be a lot slower digesting. Would you then probably err on the side of leaner cuts of meat, leaner steak, leaner mince, say like chicken mince, for instance, like 5% and stuff like that? That's then going to digest quicker, so we can still have a high protein and then get fat sources from other sources, like say like avocados, nuts, and so forth. Because that protein in my head would then break down faster because it's a leaner protein. Is that correct in my thought?
It will break down faster, yes. The thing is that the reasoning for choosing slightly leaner proteins is there needs to be a bit of context here. If you're in that stage where you need to hit slightly lower fat content because you're trying to gain more leanly, your calories are slightly lower, you're in a lower surplus, then you can use slightly leaner cuts of meats and fish and whatever. If you're trying to just eat as many calories as you can, then don't worry about the rate that protein is going to break down, because you're just trying to eat as many calories as possible to get to 4,000, 3,500. So that's when using higher fat mince, higher fat meats, and whatever eggs is going to help you. Eating a lot, like Ash said at the start, it's tough. Like there's a common issues that people find or there's things that make food more filling, and that's high protein content in general, high fiber content, high water content. It be actually being hard to chew, like actually being hard to thing. And one of the other things, it doesn't taste very good. We don't want to eat a lot of things that don't taste that good. So what you can do is we've got some advice on how to eat more calories. And this is where we would suggest, like, instead of eating a whole steak, like if you were eating a rump or a fillet and you got to chew it and cut it, how much easier is it to eat mince? So make it pre-digested, broken down. How much easier is it to eat, like slow cooked chicken, which is like shredded, as opposed to like a whole chicken breast? If you're thinking about vegetables, eat ones that are lower fiber, tomatoes and cucumber and spinach and things, as opposed to broccolis and cauliflowers and, like voluminous ones. And if you're looking at carbohydrate sources, again, more rices, more pastas, more noodles, as opposed to, whole new potatoes that are going to fill you up relatively quickly and not give you the most bang for your buck. So this is why, I don't really agree with it when I see this on Instagram. I'm actually saying that I do agree with it now, so maybe I do. Is this like muscle gaining foods? Do you know what I mean? Like, eat these to gain muscle. Well, you can eat anything to gain muscle, but actually, like, stuff that is energy dense but is easier to digest is going to help you to hit those higher calories. But for me, meal frequency, using a balance of liquid nutrition and snack based for energy dense sources, and then whole meals, is going to be the best way to approach it. And if you really look at the people that have been successful, they will all do this. They don't all eat just only whole meals and loads of broccoli, and I know, like, they will mix it up. And for me, don't worry about the rate of protein breakdown. Just worry about getting enough in.
Yeah, my thought obviously with the protein breakdown was for if people get full easily. So it's just like, I'm thinking more as, does it digest quicker? So because this is then where I wanted to then go into the carbohydrate side of stuff, because if we're trying to increase calories and we're hitting our protein, and we've got our protein target, and if we say pick a chicken mince rather than a 20% steak mince, and then we get the extra calories that we would have got from the 20% steak mince, and we put them in the carbohydrates, so calories equate to the same, but we now get more carbs in that meal, and we still hit the same protein. Would that be easier for someone to digest and be able to then get to their next meal easier, rather than having, say, chicken thighs or steak with the same amount of rice, calories equal? And then they'll be like, oh, I'm still too satiated, and because carbohydrates will break down quicker.
100%.
Sweet.
Yeah, 100%. You're using the principles there, like, exactly right.
Yeah,
definitely.
So
that's why we talk about meal frequency, because if you're just eating huge meals, like, you know what it's like. You don't want to eat for like maybe 3-4 hours later. Like, whereas if you do eat the correct things, spot on, you'll be ready to eat again, and that's going to help you to achieve your goal.
So with carbohydrates, do we need to start thinking about what sources? Because obviously you've touched on there about you'd err towards the side like the rices, the noodles, rather than the potatoes. Does that mean I should start increasing my sweet intake as well, like Haribo's, like Tang Fast Sticks and stuff like that? Should I be increasing that around my workout nutrition, or is that just an old fallacy which I really want to try and maintain and hold on to?
Oof. The thing is that, for me, I'm always going to err on the side of the best quality that you can eat. However, I do understand that as you get to higher calorie intakes, it's challenging. Do you mean like eating in a surplus, especially if you're a big guy or girl, getting up to a higher calorie intake? I find anywhere over 3,000, it does become challenging to eat from, like, quote unquote healthy foods. Like, you do need to start to include foods that are kind of less nutrient dense. So that's where then, like you say, using things around workouts that are very high in carbohydrate, low in protein, low in fat, then will help you to provide carbohydrates for your energy for your training session. So yeah, but I don't want to give people license to just start smashing Haribo before their workout, because that's not the thing that they need to focus on at the start. Carbohydrates are probably the most underrated thing for muscle building and getting stronger, in my opinion. I know there's people on YouTube, keto gains and all of this, but I'm not. All of the literature, all of the research, all of the years that I've been coaching nutrition, the people that have gained the better progress have been the people that eat and more carbohydrates. Now, there's two reasons for this. Firstly, you need energy. Okay, you need energy to train. And if you don't, you are walking uphill with a car on your back in a truck. Like, it's tough work.
Yeah.
Training consistently, okay, because we need consistency for building muscle. It's hard training consistently to see progressive overload. You can get away with it for short periods of time, but I just don't think you can get away with it for a long period of time to see sustained progress. So you need it for energy, okay, but you need it for recovery and protein sparing. So carbs will spare protein to do the job that protein actually wants to do. If you're very low carbohydrate, your body will find energy from somewhere. Okay. And protein can be converted into gluconeogenesis, but it's a terrible thing for us to be doing. We don't want to be doing that because it's a very inefficient process. And also, we're using the thing that we're trying to build as an energy source, muscle. We don't want to be doing that. So the benefits of eating higher carbohydrates, so up around 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 grams per kilo per body weight, can be that it increases insulin. We know that insulin is an anabolic hormone. It stores, okay? So we need insulin to grow. It increases glycogen, and this helps with recovery. It helps you to recover faster so you can then train more frequently. And it also helps to lower cortisol, which we know that we don't want cortisol. We need it for very short periods of time to help mobilize energy, but we don't need constantly elevated levels because it's catabolic. It will break your muscle tissue down, and carbohydrates increase insulin, and insulin helps to lower cortisol. So this is why carbohydrates for me are just so underutilized when we're trying to build muscle. And those that are saying that they've hit plateaus and that they can't see any progress, most of the time people don't eat low protein. I don't see. If you are a person that's training and you have gone on to try to get stronger, I don't think you ever have an issue of eating too low protein. I probably think you're eating too few carbs. And if you do this, you will see progress. Okay, it's providing the body with the state to build muscle. Okay, if glycogen is full, your body's like, yeah, let's go. I can go. I can train. I can build. Like, I've got, I'm in a state ready to build muscle. All the time I see people go into the gym and they walk in with this like blue powder in a shaker and be like chugging this pre-workout that's got 0 carbs in and a ton of stimulants, and they're chasing the pump. I'm like, if you chucked 50, 60, 70 grams of carbs in that, I'm telling you, you ain't going to be able to fit in that t-shirt. The pump is going to be so real. Like, you will get stronger if you fuel your sessions with carbohydrates. And people are scared. And this is what we kind of spoke about earlier. Like, we're scared of getting fat because that's what we've been taught that happens when we eat carbohydrates. If you follow any diet at the start and you increase your carbohydrates, you will gain weight. And that's mostly due to water, because you're going to increase your glycogen levels and the amount of food that's in your gut. Okay. You haven't stuck on 2 kilos of body fat in 4 days. Okay. It will, the first, second, and third, and fourth week of any diet, when you start to increase your carbohydrate, that's the true kind of test. That's where you'll start to kind of see where you're going. So don't worry about the first week, but you will feel benefit if you start to increase this. And all of the research suggests the same. Okay. You can build it. You can build muscle when you follow a ketogenic diet. Okay. If stimulus is there, training is there, protein is high, calories are high, but it's like getting to the top of the Empire State Building. All right. Keto is taking the stairs. Carbs is taking the lift. You can get there. You can get there, right? It's going to be bloody hard work, and you are going to be doing it in so much more of a longer time frame. So for me, anyone that's struggling, like, eat good quality carbohydrates first. So like the whole food sources, try to get it up to maybe the higher levels of what I've just mentioned there. So maybe you're looking at 5 grams, 6 grams, 7 grams. Okay.
Yep.
Maybe start on your training days and then edge it up to every day. This would be something that I would definitely think that most people are missing if they've hit a plateau.
So just what you said there it was kind of slightly answers my question, but I'd like it to be a bit clearer. Is there a case for some lower carbohydrate days to increase insulin sensitivity, so that you said there about on the training day to have higher carbohydrates, and then you want to be upping them on the non-training days as well? So obviously your overall caloric intake for the week will be nice and high, but would there be benefit of having, say, lower carbohydrate days on your rest days and having higher carbohydrate days equating your weekly calories to be the same?
I love this question, Rob. I love this question. I knew you was going to ask me it as well. I only suggested that was because when people start to try and eat a lot across every day, it's challenging. And again, we want to still make sure that we're not just going into this chaos of just eat whatever I want, dirty bulk. So at that, like, there is case to increase it on training days as the first step. That's what would be my suggestion, because that's when the body is placed under stress, and this is where we need energy. Okay. When people cut their calories or lower their calories, potentially carbohydrates, on rest days, I think this is a strategy that can be utilized if you find that you don't have negative reactions of going into your session following a rest day with low energy and sluggishness. If you can, when you say cut your calories, it's not being 50 grams of carbs or less. You should still eat carbohydrates on your rest day. It's maybe just dropping them down to, again, if we zoom out, it's balancing your calories across the week, across the 2 weeks, across the month. So it's a strategy that I think can work if you're inclined to be able to kind of do that easily. So now we spoke about doing that because you're pretty dialed in with your nutrition and you understand how to manipulate it. For me, what I would suggest for people that are just getting started is to not put your carbs and calories super high on training days, is to balance them out across the week. Okay. What that then does is it gives a more balanced approach so that we know that on rest days, you're still recovering. You know, all of the studies show that you're, depending on the volume and intensity and what type of exercise that you've done, it can take up to 72 hours to fully recover from a training session. So if you're cutting your calories on a rest day, or you're limiting your body's potential for recovery. So this is what I see all the time, mainly with CrossFitters.
Yeah.
That they cut the calories low on a rest day, and then they come in a Monday morning or whenever or Friday, because International Rest Day on Thursday, and they go, oh man, I always feel sluggish. I always feel sluggish after a rest day. And they're like, oh, that's when then they justify it to themselves that they don't take rest days. And I'm like, well, stop eating like a 13-year-old boy on your rest day. Eat some carbohydrates, and you'll come into your session after a day off feeling refreshed, feeling full of glycogen and ready and recovered, rather than just getting through and then overstimulating that session. So for me, I prefer more balance across the week.
Yeah.
Because I think it covers both performance and recovery, as opposed to just hitting high amounts on training days. For me, focuses more on that session and potentially impairs people's recovery.
So on from that makes perfect sense. So then obviously your recommendation is, especially if you're starting out, make sure you've got a nice balanced approach through the week, get those calories high, get the carbohydrates high, get your protein set, and obviously worry about fat, which we'll go into in a bit. How about, so obviously with the insulin sensitivity part, and again, I don't know how essential this is, if we kept the calories balanced throughout the week and on the rest days, the fats are higher and maybe your protein may be a little bit higher and your carbohydrates are a little bit lower. So then to improve insulin sensitivity on the days where we're training, so we can utilize those carbohydrates better. If calories equal the same, would that be an approach that if you're someone that's a little bit more seasoned and have a little bit of a better understanding of their nutrition, could that be a strategy to potentially get more out of your nutrition on your training days?
Potentially it could be. In terms of insulin sensitivity, there's dropping carbohydrates is one way that you can increase sensitivity, but you can also do, when you train, you become more insulin sensitive. Like, there's other ways of doing that. So I don't think the reasoning behind doing it for increasing insulin sensitivity is right. Like, the research shows that the more carbs you eat, the more carbohydrate oxidation that happens. So you're better at burning carbohydrates and utilizing it for energy. So dropping it, I don't know. I think it's a method to manipulate calories as opposed to focusing on insulin sensitivity.
Okay.
That would be my opinion on it.
Unless you really
in
need
the
to
end,
improve
this is
insulin sensitivity. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. Unless you
Yeah.
need to improve insulin sensitivity, which then losing weight is probably going to be the best way to do it. So,
So this is the
being
wrong
in a
episode for you.
surplus is not. You're trying to do everything, and it's
Yeah.
just not going to happen. So
Listen to a calorie fucking
there, you
deficit
got to look
episode.
at your. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's where then, like you say, Ash, there you got to, losing weight is going to be the biggest driver for improving that.
Yeah, brilliant. And on the carbs, protein, we talked about even meal spacing and spreading the protein across the day. What's the thought with carbs? Because you hear a lot of people talking about pre and post workout meals. Should we be putting most of our carbs there? Is it a good idea to have any zero carb meals if you're trying to get bigger or stronger?
In terms of zero carb meals, I mean, that comes down to preference. Like, as long as you're hitting your overall carb intake, then you're happy to have zero carb meals. If you like to have like a lighter dinner, for example, you find that helps you to not feel full in the evening or whatever. Or if you'd like to start the day with more protein or fat, then do that. But then this is where I was talking about that disparity between what you're doing and the goal and your progress. If you're eating low, zero calorie or zero carb meals, and you're saying to me, I'm not making progress with my, my muscle building, and I'm struggling through sessions, I haven't increased my percentages in 4 weeks, then I'm like, well, eat more, like, and start with eating more carbohydrates. Like, your habits that you're doing are not conducive to the goals that you want to achieve. So it's completely fine to do that if you're still seeing progress and if you hit the calorie target, carbohydrate target across your day. Pre and post training, I think, is when people say get most of their carbohydrates in it, it depends on the amount that you're eating. I like to distribute it. I like to skew it a little bit around training, definitely. But I don't think just trying to eat as many carbs as you can around training is a sensible strategy. So the body can only digest a certain amount of carbohydrates per hour anyway. So, you're up around, depending on how well you've trained your gut and what type of carbohydrates you're eating, you can kind of digest around 60 to 70 grams per hour, sometimes 80. So if you have a mixture of fructose and glucose, so this is why a lot of the sports gels that you'll see, endurance racing, will have a mixture 2-to-1 glucose to fructose, because that's how you can increase the absorption rate to higher amounts. So if you're looking at putting most of your carbs and you've got to eat 400 grams of carbs, then you're eating 100 grams in an hour, you're not going to be utilizing that. So don't do that. So for me, I would make sure that you are fueling your session. So when I say that, I mean eating pre-workout. And all you 6 a.m.ers and 5 a.m.ers will be like, well, how do I do that? Well, use liquid nutrition.
Yeah.
Like, take a carb powder, use a sports drink, fruit juice. Like, there's ways that you should do this, and you will feel the benefit. And then, yes, eating some carbohydrates in that post-workout window within an hour is a sensible strategy, because what we're looking to do is we're not just looking to, help. It's not an important thing when you're training 3 times a week and just looking to be healthy. But if you're looking to get seriously strong and you're looking to put serious muscle on, then take advantage of nutrient timing. Like, anabolic window exists. It's just that most people don't need to worry about it. But if you're struggling, hitting a plateau, or you want to really maximize your performance and recovery, then take advantage. Putting in 50, 60 grams of carbs with some protein in that hour period after your training session will benefit. Will benefit your recovery, will benefit your progress, and then you can distribute the rest across the day as you see fit.
Yeah. That's something I want to go back to that you said earlier about it's difficult to eat a big surplus with nutrient-dense foods. So you usually turn to less nutrient-dense foods. I just thought it was an interesting way to describe it, because what is it about nutrient-dense foods that's hard to overeat on? And in my bro science understanding of it, it's basically when food's nutrient dense, your body knows it's getting what it needs. So it's got what it needs, so it doesn't want for any more. Whereas if you eat low nutrient dense foods, even though the calories are coming in, it doesn't have the essential nutrients that it actually needs. So that's why you still stay hungry, because your body's like, say you've eaten a bag of sugar, shitloads of calories, but no nutrition, no nutrients. So you will still be hungry, even though you might have hit your calorie target for the day. Is there any truth in that?
Not to say that I don't agree with that, because I do agree with it. I think that's quite subjective. I don't think it's science backed. I don't think the body knows that sugar doesn't have any nutrients in it. I think it knows that it doesn't have any protein in it, and it knows it doesn't have any fat in it. So it spikes your blood sugar, and then you're hungry again an hour later. Like when I say nutrient dense, most of the time that's in a whole food source. So it has a blend of different things. So if we took, fruit juice compared to the whole fruits, again, like the composition of that's where I think the body is then like, if you ate, 2 apples, you would feel fuller than drinking the equivalent of fruit juice of 2 apples. So it's the composition of food that I think is the challenging thing, that's the thing I'm talking about in terms of when I say nutrient dense. That's it's harder to eat that higher amounts. So when we go to less nutrient dense foods, these are normally more highly palatable. So they're probably in lower protein, so less satiating, and they are normally more refined. So again, they're easier for the body to break down and digest. So again, we're not getting that fullness. And so that's when it's easier to hit them. And when we say nutrient dense, like you say, it has more micros as well as the macronutrients in it. And we do need that. Like, again, this building muscle is an intensive process. We need to make sure that we are providing the body with the micros as well as the macronutrients. And as long as you have those fundamentals, then yes, then getting to the higher calorie targets would then be a requirement to move towards like some of these, like say, quote unquote, less energy dense foods, but they're a functional food. Then they're helping you to achieve a certain goal. So, that can be fueling sessions or just helping you hit a high calorie intake.
That kind of makes me think of like if I'm having quite highly palatable foods, I can knock back a lot more quicker before my body realizes how full I am. And an example of that is, I know I've been to, so I saw Ash went and had a couple of burgers yesterday, and I know I've been to, say, Honest Burger, and I've had 2 Honest Burgers and 2 plates of chips, and I don't get full or I don't realize I've probably eaten too much until I'm like halfway through the second portion of chips. So I've eaten both burgers, I've gone through a portion of chips. The main reason is it's just because it's so salty, but I do like that salt. But I'm going through it, so I'm just drinking. So it's like, when it's hot, and I know, like with Krispy Kremes, it's like the ratio of carbs to fats is just right for like the signaling apparently in your brain for it to realize, so you can knock them back until then suddenly bang, the sugar hits and you're like, I feel fucked. So it's so easy to overconsume these foods. So that could always be a strategy if you are someone that does struggle, because you can eat a bolus amount and then hopefully you can then digest it and feel ready to go again a little bit later.
Yeah, this goes into the slippery slope of dirty bulking. I'm not telling people to eat ice cream and burgers to bulk, to hit their calories. However, but you're absolutely right. Like, highly palatable foods will pretty much be carbohydrates and fats, because they're very easy to overconsume. There's a lot of stuff on food science and the way that our body digests, and processes it that is way out of my knowledge base. So I'm not going to go down that route. But again, it's also the rate that you eat. Like we eat burgers relatively quickly, like as opposed to if we made that into, steak and, a bit of bread and, separated those down and made it into a slightly different thing. So if you had steak and new potatoes, and match the carbs to it, it would take you a lot longer to eat and you'd feel a lot fuller than eating 2 burgers. Because the rate that we eat, like the body hasn't registered. So, it comes to that. So it all comes down to trying to eat the correct things for me as your foundation. If you can base the majority of your muscle building diet, strength based diet, with good quality whole foods, then 100%. When you get to a higher calorie target, you need to be including, other foods. But this is where you can still include whole foods, so whole milk, like blended fruits, like seeds and nuts, and liquid stuff like maple syrup and honey and coconut milk and stuff like this. Is a very energy dense, but they're still good quality. They're still going to provide you good quality nutrients. So for me, that's how I would approach things with people.
Yeah. We hinted at it earlier, just before we should move on from carbs, because we're going to run out of time otherwise. Something we touched on earlier was the difference between eating for strength versus eating for size, and what would be some differences in approach with carbohydrates if you're eating for strength versus eating for size, if any.
If any. So this is where I would undulate potentially, because strength is all about performance. So if you can fuel your sessions and get the benefits of having more carbohydrates around your session, so you can hit a higher output and do better in your training sessions, and that's your key thing. You could be whatever body composition you want, but if your strength numbers are going up. So for me, I think that's where an undulating approach could be better for carbohydrates, and it's also where I would then prioritize them more around your training sessions. If you're looking to just get stronger as opposed to getting bigger. So that would be the two key differences between.
Would you go for faster carbs as well around training? Or
yeah, definitely, mate.
Yeah,
definitely. Yeah, this is where you can use gels, liquid nutrition, so carb powders, and if you're training in the day, then utilizing, like you say, fast acting fruits, like and these types of things, where again you're not going to be having loads of fiber and loads of protein and loads of fat in them, because they're going to be blood glucose is going to be high, so you're going to be able to utilize it as energy. So that'd be the two key things. There's a really cool graph and study that I will send you boys, in terms of they did a estimated proportion of total strength gains over time, over 5 years, and what contributed to it. And as it kind of, in the early stages, and you guys would be much more be able to provide insight on this, it was coordination, kind of neurological output, and activation in the first kind of week, month, 2 to 3 months. Hypertrophy plays such a little role in terms of people's strength gains. And then it was only a 1 year and 5 years that it played a role, kind of a more of a significant role. But even then, it's such a small amount that actually it's, there's so many different things that improve when you're just looking at strength and 1RM, 3RM, that again, you don't have to get bigger to get stronger. And this is what that 75 kilo geezer that's lifting 400 kilos can attest to. But often, like you say, we can get stronger without getting bigger. This is what I always tell the footballers as well, and they don't believe me. But
100%.
I haven't won that battle in 15 years, so I don't think I'm going to win it.
To round off our 4 pillars, what do we need to know about fat for getting bigger and stronger? So,
like we spoke about here, the nutrient density, fats help to absorb fat-soluble vitamins. So we need fat in our diet, okay? And fat-soluble vitamins such as A, E, D, and lots of different polyphenols and antioxidants. So we need fats in our diet. We also need it for hormone production. We need it for kind of cellular health. So our cells, require fat to function optimally. So there's lots of different things that fat does. Again, we've spoken a lot about it in terms of energy source. But again, when we're talking about, the type of training that we're going to be doing to build muscle, we need a little bit more carbohydrate. So fat as an energy source is not very good, but it's absolutely essential to help us grow and to recover and to see results. Like I said, if we run through it, you're going to have 1.6 grams minimum of protein, up to probably 2.4 is the optimal. Then carbohydrates, again, you're probably looking at 3 grams to up to 7 grams, and that's quite a wide range. But fats, again, for me, 0.75 to 1.5 grams per kilo of body weight is where you want to be. Okay, so if we're looking at a 70 kilo guy, I can't do the maths with 0.75, but roughly
Just
about
say 100 kilos,
grams.
75 grams of, so
There
you
you
use
go,
me,
yeah,
there you
yeah,
go, nice 75 grams of fat.
So you want to be aiming around 100 grams, Rob.
Yeah.
But again, if you're looking at across the week, that's something that you could drop down a little bit on your lower days to help manage calories, as opposed to dropping a load of carbs. Okay, you want to keep protein relatively consistent, but fat's essential. I think sometimes, it's also a very energy dense source. So if you are struggling, once you've got protein and once you've matched carbs, if you're still not gaining weight, we talked about that band and that trajectory. If you're still not gaining weight and you're eating enough and your energy is good, but you're not just gaining weight, then you can add more fats in to go up to 1.25, 1.3, 1.4, 1.5, because it's probably not going to change the composition of your meal too much. Drizzle a bit of olive oil on there, or have some guacamole on the side. Like, it's an easy addition to your diet that isn't going to necessarily change the composition too much.
So I really like that. And when I think about fats is mainly because for palatableness, if that's the word.
Yeah, 100%.
I love like chicken thighs compared to chicken breasts. I like more like ribeye. To be fair, I love a fillet, but so I like ribeye compared to, say, sirloin. So like I'm gonna choose the fattier meats mainly because I'm gonna enjoy the meal more. And I think if someone's struggling to eat, enjoyment of what you're eating will have to play a part. It can't be the only part, because as we've spoken to about this whole episode, you're probably going to need to get a little bit uncomfortable in your training and your nutrition to make change in the body. It's going to be uncomfortable. Whereas we can try and make that journey a little bit more enjoyable by then enjoying what we're eating, by then, as I said, picking meats and stuff like that, picking protein sources that are going to be enjoyable. And same as your protein powders, like if you do have to utilize protein powders to up your protein, get a nice flavor one that every day you're looking forward to that. At the end of the day, like, cool, I'm going to have like 2 scoops of protein post workout. Like, at least enjoy it. Don't get a crappy one which, I've got to have my protein shake now. Like, make it a thing, because it's such an easy 100%. Win.
Yeah, don't buy the 5 kilos of banana flavour because it was 14 quid.
Yeah, don't do that. So I think we've covered those 4 pillars amazingly. Now, I think the most important part to take away from there is they're the foundations to our building, or like our house, as we've alluded to, all those builders. Is there anything that we can do, like through supplementation, that can improve our rate of strength, our rate of muscle growth? Obviously, they're 2 different bits that we need to talk about separately. Or is there bits that you would be taking no matter what, whether you're trying to build muscle or build strength?
Okay, yeah, I'll answer the first one. Like, in terms of supplementation, strength is an area, and muscle gain is an area that actually supplements have proven to help with. Like, with fat loss, no. But with strength, yes. The first thing I would say is the biggest performance enhancement that you're going to see is treating any deficiency. So all of the research, when they've been like, oh, maybe you've seen researchers and they're like, oh, magnesium helps to improve this, or this, vitamin D helps to improve muscle strength. most of the time it's when people are deficient in those, and you treat that deficiency and bring them back to an adequate level, sufficient level, or you bring them to an optimal level. So I would suggest that if you haven't done any blood work and seen what's under the hood, what's actually happening in your physiology, go and get that done and see, because that just allows you to target any supplementation and food choices right away. That's going to be the biggest enhancement of that, rather than taking Tonkat Ali or I know some other thing you're getting spammed on Instagram with. Like, do that first. Then protein supplements, definitely. Okay, they're an easy way to get your higher protein intake, because we know that that's an absolute foundation. So definitely, and then the quality of them are so good these days. You know, back in the day, then 20 years ago, then they're a bit funky, but now they're really good. Then you're talking about things such as caffeine, creatine, which are proven to help improve power output, strength, muscle hypertrophy. What creatine is, but these things are proven. Like, they help with muscle gain, hypertrophy, and getting stronger. Okay, so if you're not taking these, you don't have to be chugging. You don't have to take caffeine, but it does help with exercise performance. So again, helping with that key fundamental of training in the correct way. Creatine, definitely. I mean, we used to say, oh, it's a cheap supplement, but because of the worldwide shortage of it now, it's not that cheap, but it's still beneficial. Yeah, no. Yeah, should have stockpiled that before COVID. You'd have been laughing. But creatine, 100%, it still works. The other one that people might have heard of is beta alanine. Now, the studies on actually getting muscle hypertrophy directly there isn't any robust research. What it can do is help with exercise performance. Now, I'm on the fence on it, because the type of exercise that you need to do in terms of getting bigger and stronger maybe doesn't lend itself to the type of exercise that beta alanine has been shown to be beneficial for. So like more 60, 80 seconds to 2 minutes, that type of CrossFit style, more functional kind of like, circuit stuff, or sprinting kind of endurance stuff. That's where beta alanine helps more so, but it can still help with improving exercise performance. So it's not directly helping with increasing muscle hypertrophy, but it potentially might help depending on what type of training that you're doing. I know you guys are covered on building muscle with CrossFit and that type of thing. So, that's an area where I don't think it's a necessary thing, but it might be something that could be helpful. Now, more recently, like vitamin D, definitely, like there's vitamin D receptors on all the muscle, and it can help muscle function. So, coming out the winter months, people might still be vitamin D deficient. So again, if you're not taking vitamin D, get your blood work done. Or if you, are like a hermit like me, and I work inside, training inside, and I can't remember last time I see the sun, I definitely still supplement without even getting my blood work done. So it's really cheap, and I think it's pretty much something that most people in the UK and definitely in the Northern Hemisphere would benefit from. So yeah, for me, that would be to add in. The ones that are on the border now for me,
so
nitrates,
just
ashwagandha
quickly before we move on, just quickly, because I if we could talk a little bit about dosages, and also the beta alanine, where I think there could be a case for it, because obviously where you're talking about the amount of time is where we might be doing, obviously looking for building muscle, and we're performing things like drop sets, things to failure, where sets will take more than a classic 8 to 12, say maybe 60 seconds if you follow a good tempo. Maybe that might be where you can then sustain the discomfort for longer when you're going into those kind of sets. So that's just more of a thought process there. The dosages now with creatine, obviously 5 grams a day is what we kind of, most people, or 3 to 5 grams. I think people say, like women around the 3, guys around the 5. I've heard if you're a bigger guy, someone like 100 kilos, I generally take about 2 scoops, which is going to be like closer to 10. Now, obviously, if you take it consistently enough over time, you're going to saturate your body with it anyway. Is there a case for me taking closer to, say, 8 to 10 grams a day compared to the 5 because I'm bigger? And if someone else is bigger, do you think that's the case? Or is that just a load of hoo-ha?
No, it's actually something that we done a post on I've done it a couple of times now, where I looked at the research and kind of formulated a little bit of like amalgamating a few studies and came up with 0. I always get this wrong. 0.01 grams per kilo of body weight. So that means if you're a 100 kilo guy, you take 10 grams. If you're a 70 kilo person, then you would take 7 grams. I think the 5 gram is a good thing to get that dose, and if you do take it consistently, I think you're fine. But also, we have turnover of creatine, so if you can take a lower dose, but you might not be getting the maximal benefits if your body is very large and, like you, have a very large muscle mass. So I do think there's a case to be slightly higher. The bigger you are, the more muscle mass you have.
So 0.1 grams per kilo will be then obviously get us to that 10 grams for me, which is perfect.
If it's 0.1,
otherwise if it's 0.01, it's 1 gram, which is 0.1.
Right there.
It's 0.1,
My maths is terrible. I used to be good at maths.
So
0.1.
Yeah.
Okay. So that for me is a nice thing, because then people can go, okay, that makes it's a little bit more personalized as opposed to just a blanket whatever. Now there is a little bit more nuance as well. If someone's training more, twice a day, CrossFit athlete side of things, then I potentially might even go up higher amounts, even if they're like a lighter person. So like, say if they're 75, but they're training like 12 times a week, I might suggest that they actually go up towards 8-10 grams, and then see the benefits of it. So yeah, that dosing wise is there. The other one for beta alanine, if you do take it, I actually find that I get very nauseous with it. I think a few people have as well. And I don't mind the tingling, but I actually feel sick when I take higher dosage. So one thing that there's a really cool research study that came out in terms of people often put it into pre-workouts, but the timing doesn't matter. It's about saturation, and the saturation time could be about 4 weeks. And I often put it into a large water bottle and sip it over like a morning or an afternoon. And because I'm distributing the dose, I find that I don't feel as sick with it. And this has helped some of my clients also get in enough. There is a couple of products that have slow release beta alanine, but they're super expensive. So I wouldn't, suggest them. But that's just a little simple trick that if you do find that A, the tingles are too much, or B, that you feel a bit nauseous, spread it out over the day. You can split your dose as well. That's an easy thing. But then you got to remember to take it twice a day. So it's, again, consistency.
And could we then talk about those, like, the on the fence ones, the ones that, if you can and you've got the extra funds and you want some extra performance enhancements, what would those kind of things be?
Yeah, nitrates is the one that I'm excited about. They're often perpetrated for aerobic and a more endurance-based stuff, but there's a lot of research coming out in terms of increasing, like using it acutely. So using it 90 minutes to 2 hours before a session, and then that's increasing squat performance, power output. So there's a bit in there in terms of actual strength development in that. It's still quite early, but there's some promising stuff on it. Betaine as well. This is one myself and Luke did a research review on this, and looked into whether it's you might have seen it as TMG in terms of like it's a trimethylglycine. It's in some products, some pre-workouts, and other things. Something like post-workout shakes. It's got some good research behind it in terms of increasing strength development. Again, relatively early. And then ashwagandha is the other one, increasing power output. So not directly in terms of hypertrophy, but power output and strength performance. You have to take quite a lot. That's the only problem with this. But there is some promising research on it. So they're the three that I'd be on the fence with. That there is some good studies, solid studies on there, which we'll again send across. But they are promising. I'm looking forward to seeing more robust studies being done on them, more longitudinal studies being done on them. And now, all of the other ones that you might have heard of, people probably, testosterone, and we've done a research review on that one. And Tonkat Ali, I think people are sending me this every week, I think, saying, shall I take this? And this is basically due to testosterone production. This is where they've been kind of in the research been said like, oh, take these and increase your testosterone, which then increases your strength performance. But the only analogy I can say is that I mean the research studies are very weak, very very weak. A lot of them are rodent studies, and it's just like saying, oh, here's a 70-pound plaster, go and stick it on yourself to mask crappy food choices, poor sleep, and not training correctly. So yeah, or too high body fat. Like if you want to increase testosterone, get leaner, strength train, and sleep better. Like don't worry about spending 70 quid on a pill. Like it's that type of thing that my stock response is on them. So don't waste your money. Also people that are doing that aren't taking creatine. I'm like, I was like, start with this. That's been proven for like 30 years. Then maybe we can start, focus on other areas further down the line. But that's a kind of hopefully a quick overview on supplements, but it can help.
Could I just work backwards just on those? So with the what was the last one? I haven't forgotten the last one. It was beat him in a second. What was the last one?
No, Rob, you don't need to take them.
No, ashwagandha. That was it. So, aren't you supposed to not consistently take that? Is there a thing like how often you take it? Is that a thing, or is it okay to take it regularly?
If it's a thing, I haven't. Yeah, if it's a thing, I haven't heard of it. I would like to read that. Where that's come from.
Probably just put it out my ass.
I don't understand. Yeah, in my experience, in my knowledge, I don't understand why that would be the case.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. I probably I might have missed something. Yeah.
It's not like taking something. It's not like taking exogenous testosterone, which is going to then lower your own production of testosterone, or it's not like taking something that is synthetic. It's a natural product that's helping your body deal with stress. So I don't know. I haven't seen that. So if anyone does have anything that I would like,
I'll have a little look and see if I can find what I might have thought it was. And just lastly, on the nitrates, is there anything in particular you'd recommend taking? Any particular branded ones? Because obviously the ones I know, like Beat It and like Cherry Active, like those kind of things. Is that basically what you're saying we should be taking if we want to go that little bit extra, that 0.1%?
Yeah, just get the shots. They're really cool. Like you can get them on Amazon or B-tip shots, and they're really good. 400. The research suggests 400 to 800 milligrams, but I think those shots cover that. So you only need kind of one. Like that's the good thing for me. This is why nitrate supplementation is promising, is because it's relatively easy to get the actual required dose that they say in the research. I know some of the research studies are like, like turmeric, turmeric and curcumin helps, but you got to take 8 grams a day. And I'm like, it's not going to happen.
No.
So, it's that type of thing that actually is very applicable in an easy way to do, like creatine. So that's why I'm quite excited about it in terms of strength development and power and training sessions. So yeah, Beat It, and the Beat Active and stuff is two good products. You can get ones that mix in like crystals as well. I think one of them, so you can actually mix it in. So it's not just the little shot. You can actually it's actually like crystals, and it's like a powder, and you can then mix it in things. But I haven't tried that yet.
Brilliant. So just to sort of sum up what we've covered so far, we've gone through the 4 pillars. We've gone through meal timing, frequency, and differences between size and strength, and a few of the common pitfalls. Are there any other things you think people really need to know, Liam, when they're considering eating to get bigger or stronger?
Yeah, I think we often, like you said, the training is sometimes people find that the training's hard. I think that talking from personal experience, one of the common faults that I had was I was doing enough strength training. I was just doing too many extras that were impairing my progress. So those that are listening on YouTube, you can see I'm getting jacked right now because I'm not doing any. All I'm doing is strength training and lunges and mobility work with Jamie, who's under your umbrella, mate. And I'm not doing as many metcons and output, and it's helping me. I'm putting on muscle, and I think a lot of the people out there would be like, you've got to train in the correct way, and it's tough because people train for so many other reasons. I used it for a mental break, for a switch off, and I just bloody love training with people and doing things, but it was in stopping my progress in terms of getting stronger and bigger. And you can get frustrated with this unless you understand it. So I've always joked over the years that I've stayed pretty lean, but I've always not been as strong as I should have been for the amount I train, because I just love training too much. You've got to be really honest. This is the thing. If you want to get stronger, you've got to be super honest with the type of training that you're doing, super honest with your intake, and it's tough. I think gaining muscle is harder than losing fat. And there are so many things there's so many things that we think we're doing correctly, like eating protein, that you are probably doing correctly, but you need to do other things. And hopefully these pillars that we've spoken about, training correct way, eating enough calories consistently, playing the long game a little bit, making sure that carbohydrate intake is adequate to fuel the sessions and help you to recover, eating enough fat to get your calories up, but also help with recovery and hormonal kind of areas. You got to be really honest with yourself, because we can sometimes think that we're doing the correct things, but actually when you step away, zoom out across a week, across 2 weeks, across a month, 3 months, what are you doing? Again, you might be doing it for 3 weeks, but then you might be going to Ibiza and not doing anything for a week, and then you don't train correctly for that week afterwards, and it's tough then. And then actually, if you zoomed out over your 3 months, are you really doing enough to build muscle, or are you doing enough just to edge it forward and then maintain? It's hard. That's what I'm saying. You can lose fat in 2 weeks, 3 weeks if you aggressively diet, but you can't build muscle linearly that quickly. It's tough. That's what I'm saying. So we've got to be brutally honest. But hopefully little conversations like this give people a bit of motivation and a bit of direction. And maybe you can plug the gap on an area that you've maybe let slip or let slide, or an area that you're like, I probably need to do that now. I'm not doing that.
Yeah, I just want to echo your point on reviewing your training. When we think about the problem of not gaining, you're not in a surplus, and people complain that they struggle to eat. So if you're struggling to eat, say 3,250 calories, one way to get yourself into that surplus is you can eat 3,000 but drop a training session. And people don't think of the other side of the equation. They always just think I've got to eat more and more and more. But there is a point where it's very difficult to eat more. So actually training a little bit less is how you get into a surplus. But it's something that a lot of people don't like to consider. But sometimes it's the easiest way to actually get over the maintenance line into surplus territory.
100%. I'm not a trainer. We're not a coach. We don't advise people on training. But I'm always looking at it and going, they're just doing so much junk volume. And this is where I'm like, if you cut that out, that's just burning calories that you could use for building muscle, because you've done the predominant amount of session that's helping you to see progress. And then you're just adding all this extra stuff in that's just actually stopping you from seeing, progress towards your goal. So yeah, you're right, mate. Definitely.
Stealing
good
the
to have
bricks.
that balance on that seesaw. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly.
So, mate, thank you so much. Longest episode to date now. We're peaking up. We're turning the old Joe Rogans, aren't we? The old 1 hour 45. But thank you. Yeah, thank you so much for coming on, mate. This has helped out loads. And I think once I've kind of gone out through my own competition, weightlifting competition I'm doing, and then finished off my dieting phase for another 4 weeks after that, I'm going to put all these things into place and put on some serious muscle. I think that's what I'm going to be. That's going to be my goal. And I'm going to be making sure I'm referring back to this episode and making sure I really am crossing my whatever it is and dotting my I's. Crossing my T's and dotting the I's. So I couldn't remember what it was. But yeah, mate, really thank you so much for coming on. As always, you are our resident nutritionist and we appreciate you every single time you come on. So thank you.
No, pleasure for having me, lads. I hope listeners have got some good takeaways from this.
Yeah, we hope so too.
Big time. And just before you go, Liam, where can people find out more about your free resources that you mentioned earlier?
Yeah, on our Instagram is probably the best place. We've got links in the bio there too. We've got a free macro calculator. So if you'll be like, oh my God, what did he say about all of these numbers and calculators and all of this? Go on there. It's free. You get some advice afterwards as well on doing it. You can adjust it. You can personalize it. So that's in the link in the Instagram. We also got tons of stuff in little guides as well. So like if you go to the guide section on the Instagram, there's things on there like pre-workout nutrition, post-workout, a bit of advice, and they're all kind of collated because we don't ever scroll back through people's posts. So we just decided to put it all there. And we have our own podcast as well. So there's a couple of things that we mentioned. We're going to get the boys on as well very, very soon. Rob's been on before. But there's a few things that we spoke about here that you can kind of scroll back through some of the episodes to get a little bit more detail on. Some of the research reviews that me and Luke do, one of my coaches, cover some of these things in a little bit more detail. So that would be where I would to point people to. So at @PH_nutrition, and then all of the links will be in the little bio there.
Perfect.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for coming on the show, Liam. We really appreciate your time. That was one hell of an episode, our longest one to date, and I know we could have definitely carried on for longer. If you guys enjoyed that episode as much as we did, please don't forget to share it on your social medias. Don't forget to tag @lunge.lift and @ph_nutrition. As always, if you did enjoy the episode, don't forget to head over to YouTube and subscribe to our YouTube channel. It's a free way to show support to the podcast. If you're interested in signing up to the pre-access for the strength formula, don't forget to click the first link in the description box below. And as always, thank you very much for your time. We really do appreciate you guys each week tuning in. So thank you very much, and we'll see you next week.